Okay, in this video, I want to talk about how I measure watches because it came up in a previous video, particularly how I measured this watch here. And I think there's just some overall confusion. I also want to talk about why, as someone with a small wrist in particular, the specs, especially the specs that are on the Casio website, I really cannot trust those specs, and why I really don't value them. And that's the reason why I measure the watch or the watches on this channel the way that I do. And I want to know exactly how they're measuring it. And so I got a bunch of Casio watches that I own. And I want to talk about and demonstrate why it's so tricky when we try to measure watches based on case size and lug to lug and all these different things. And so that's sort of what this video is about. Taking off this watch now. As you know, I don't like taking off watches when I talk about them, but to measure them, unfortunately, I got to. So when I go through the dimensions and reviews of watches on this channel, I have that little graph, that drawing, and I go over and explain where the measurements are coming from. So when we talk about case size, especially as Casio describes it, right? They usually give 3 dimensions. I believe it's the lug to lug, it's the case size, and then it's the thickness. As a lay person, I have no idea where they're getting these measurements from. I think they're getting it from diagonal. When I see these numbers like, oh, it's 30 or 44 millimeters, or it's 39.3 or whatever that is, I have no idea what they're talking about. As someone with a small wrist, my biggest concern when it comes to a watch is usually the case size. And the only way that I can know that that's the case size, because I want to know how it looks, as well as a lug to lug, I should say, also lug to lug. But it's the case size that I'm most concerned with, because some of these watches are gigantic. I've gotten watches where the dimensions, the official dimensions, are big, and I get it, and I'm like, actually, it's where's a lot smaller? Why is that? And it's because of the way that they measured it. And there's no real standard, in my opinion, there's no real standard. So when I do my videos, I try to explain how I'm actually measuring it. So just to kind of go over what I do, because I think there may be some confusion, okay? When I put the millimeter number on my thumbnails, because that, to me, that's important. As someone with a small wrist, I could put, clickbaity words and phrases. I could do that. But as someone with a small wrist, I'm looking through the YouTube reviews for a watch that I want, and I want to just know how big it is. That's the most important thing. And how big it is, it's I have specific numbers that I want. So when I measure a watch, I'm measuring it first off from the 12 to the 6 off the case. All right, now that is very different from this, right? I think what people are doing, or when Casio is doing this, is they're measuring it from the, what is that, the 8 to the 2, and that's fair. So in this case, that'd be 39, and I think some people have mentioned, oh, it's a 39, but I'm measuring it from here to here. That's the first measurement that is important to me, because this diagonal, it's not universal. It's different for different watches. That becomes the problem. The people who do this the best online I've seen are the Japanese eBay sellers of watches, because what they'll do is they'll actually take the watch and they'll just put it right by one of those right angle rulers, and then you could just see it for yourself. So you can measure the lugs, you can see the lug distance, you can see where it is from the top to the bottom. If for like me, the case is important to you, or if you want to see what it looks like with the crown, it's just something as simple as that. It makes it so much easier to buy these watches through those sellers. Everybody else, I think they're just spitting out the specs that Casio gave. I don't know if they're actually measuring it, and even if they are, I don't know, are they doing this? Are they doing this? This number is less important to me. Here's the problem with that. So you want to measure standardize from the 8 to the 2, and that's fine. If that's the standard, then that's fine. The problem becomes when you have watches like this beauty right here, right? If you measure the case from the 8 to the 2, now you're kind of including this little crown here, this little button here, right? And so what is that? Like, that's almost 45 millimeters. So you're going to tell me this watch is 45, which in my mind is way too big, right? As someone with a small wrist, way too big. And that's the reason why I measure it here, right? I want to measure the, what is this, the octagon? I want to measure this distance from here to here, because that's what I'm gonna see on my wrist. Okay, I'm less concerned about this distance over here. Maybe there are people who are concerned about that. I'm concerned about this distance. How big is it gonna look, you know, on my actual wrist? Another thing with this is, what about the squares or odd shaped watches? So let's say the standardization is, okay, you're gonna have to measure it from the 8 to the 2. And I've been measuring it wrong this entire time. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I try to explain where it's coming from, but okay, that's fine. What do you do on watches like this that are square, that you can't do 10 to 2, right? So when I measure the watches for my video, I do my best to just put it there. So it's 30 to me, right? It's from the top to the bottom, it's 30. And then from left to right, I get about 36, okay? I'm not sure why you'd want to measure this diagonal. I mean, 39, is that helpful to anybody? 39 diagonal? Maybe as you're trying to visualize what this watch looks like. But to me, this is not helpful. I want to know, because this is a square, I want to know, you know, I want to be able to square this off. Okay, let's talk about this watch. Very odd shaped watch. It's not even a square, it's like a rectangle. Like it looks like Bender from Futurama, right? So if this is gonna be your watch and you're gonna say, okay, measure it standard, I'm like, okay, well, this is why I measure it this way and this way. But how do I measure it diagonal here, right? There's no way to measure it diagonally, because where is the diagonal? There's no 8 and 2. So again, you run into this issue of how do we measure these watches? Again, this one too, like 41. Is that what you're really gonna tell it? No, I'm like, okay, look, it's about 32 and a half. Wide is 40 and a half, and then you can measure the actual lug to lug and just know that this smaller G-Shock, it's a lot smaller than the regular square. And so all of this to say, the reason why I measure the watches the way that I do is because I'm hoping that there are people out there who they don't know what those numbers mean, because I don't know what those numbers mean sometimes. Casio gives 3 numbers. I don't know, where are they measuring it from? I gotta see where the rulers are. They gotta show a picture and the actual distance of, look, this is where it is. And then I'm like, okay, got it. But until they do that, I'm gonna keep measuring the watch the way that I am, and highlighting, I guess more importantly, highlighting the number that I think is the most important for me or for other people who are maybe more sensitive to the size of the watch, right? This just measuring is so inconsistent because of the way that all the different cases are. I mean, it would be inaccurate for me to measure from the 8 to the 2, including this little button, and say that that's how big this watch is. That would be inaccurate. It's just not true. And the way that it wears, it wears a lot smaller than that. And so for someone who wants to buy this watch, I would be doing a disservice if I said, oh yeah, it's a 45, or you know, it's bigger than it actually is. Then they're just gonna pass on it. And so I try to measure the watches based on the dimensions that I think are more useful, and I actually try to explain where the dimensions are. But this is all goes towards a bigger discussion of watches and dimensions and things like that. I think sometimes we can get so caught up in the specs and the dimensions and all of these different things, because those are the I don't know, maybe somewhat the material, the concrete stuff. But I think it's really important to also talk about the wearing experience, how it looks on your wrist, how you feel when you wear a watch. I think those things are important, and I hope that I am able to provide that on this channel. If people just want the watch just came out and you just want the flashes and the B-roll and the close-up shots, there you go. There's a couple of close-up shots. You know, you can do the whole. Oh, is it gonna focus? No, there it is. Okay, there. Or you can do the rotating one, right? The rotating one, the rotating one, right? like this is not the channel for that. I know when I've been looking for watches, I just want somebody to talk about the watch. They don't have to show it to me that much. I just want to know how it felt. I want to know the size and you know, just more interesting things that are more in depth. I'm trying to talk as if it was to a friend, not a spec sheet, not not a features list. You can read up on that. I don't want to insult people's intelligence. If they're really interested in a watch, they just want to see what it looks like on somebody's wrist, and they want to hear somebody real talk about the watch. And so that's what I'm trying to do, and that's why specs do not mean much to me, especially the ones that are online. They don't mean much to me. I try to provide the dimensions of watches. I usually say it's the least important thing. It's the boringest part to me of watch videos, because I could read it all myself. But what I do want to hear from people is their experience, what they like about it, how it feels on their wrist, how it makes them feel as they're wearing the watch. And I think those are the unique things that will, I guess, sell the watch, or maybe make it so that people don't buy the watch. There's watches that I have that I would not recommend, and I can explain why. It could even be great on specs. It just doesn't. It doesn't have that it factor. So I hope that these videos are helpful. I hope that explains how I measure watches, why I do it the way that I do. And again, we're just talking about watches. We're just having fun, and it doesn't have to be that super serious. But I know that there are people out there who they just want somebody to answer their questions, because they got to know how big the watch is or how it feels. And I'm like, for so long I was looking on YouTube, and I just wanted a video like that. And so that's why I thought, okay, I'm just gonna make these videos to maybe help people out there about buying these watches. And they can't just buy every single watch. They have to be very selective on the watches that they do have. And maybe one of these videos can help them. So thanks for watching.